Mavi had always known she would be adopted. Ever since he left the orphanage, he knew that his life would change in some way, but he never imagined how. She was 16, a difficult age to be chosen, but that's what happened. His eyes, sad and intense, caught the attention of Ezra and Santiago on a common visit. On a warm spring afternoon at one of the few adoption institutions in New York, they weren't just any couple, they were different. Ezra, with his elegant bearing, always with a calm smile and a fixed, calculating gaze, seemed like the type of person who had everything under control. Santiago, on the other hand, was the opposite, impetuous, with a gleam of restlessness in his eyes and an energy that seemed to float around him. But it was Ezra who insisted. He was the one who wanted to adopt Mavi, and Santiago, always so quiet, agreed without hesitation. The process seemed simple, but inside there was a tension that Mavi couldn't understand. Mavi's adoption was quick. After weeks of bureaucracy, papers signed, and promises made, she moved in with them. Their home was large, with white walls and minimalist decor. When entering there for the first time, Mavi thought she had arrived at the place of her dreams, a world where everything would be better. But he soon realized that not everything that looked good was good. Ezra was always affectionate, perhaps too much. He treated Mavi as if she were a rare jewel, protecting her, spoiling her, but never going beyond the limits. He knew how to deal with things and people, and it seemed that his greatest desire was to give Mavi a life he never had, a comfortable life without the anguish she carried. However, there was something about Santiago, something he couldn't hide, that Mavi felt. Since he arrived, Santiago seemed uncomfortable around her. He looked at Mavi strangely, sometimes a longer look than necessary, as if trying to read every piece of her soul, understand every movement, every expression. Mavi tried not to think about it too much, but the feeling never left her. He was always there, close, never leaving much space between them, looking for an excuse to get closer. In the first few weeks, everything was normal. They had dinner together, talked about their daily lives, and Mavi, despite her reserved manner, felt more accepted than ever. However, something began to change when Santiago began to always be present in moments that were supposed to be private. He pretended to be a friend, but he was there at times when she felt most vulnerable. As if something attracted him, as if his presence somehow was more than a simple gesture of company. One day, Mavi went to take a shower. The bathroom door was closed, but the window let in a slight draft. She didn't know, but Santiago was outside, trying to spy. Mavi felt a chill on her neck, a discomfort she couldn't explain, as if someone was there, watching her every move. The hot water fell on his skin, but the cold in his chest was something that didn't go away. Santiago never said anything, but Mavi felt his gaze. He never said much, but his gestures, his choices, said something that Mavi couldn't understand. After that, the feeling of being watched increased. Santiago began to behave more strangely, as if he was looking for opportunities to be alone with her. He always had a reason. "I'll show you a movie. I'll help you with that." Or, "It's okay. I can take you wherever you need." But behind that, Mavi was beginning to see something more. Santiago was getting closer to her in a way that didn't seem healthy. Ezra, on the other hand, didn't seem to notice. Or maybe he didn't want to understand. He was always busy with work, traveling, attending to his commitments. But that never seemed to be an excuse for Mavi. She felt increasingly alone, trapped between the two, not knowing how to deal with that situation. When she asked herself why she couldn't just leave the house, the answer came from a deep place: fear. Fear of being rejected, fear of returning to the orphanage, fear of losing the only chance at a better life. Fear made her stay quiet, enduring, waiting for time to pass until she turned 18 and could live her life as she wanted, without the pressure of the adults around her. But the days passed, and Santiago seemed more and more present. He appeared when least expected, and Mavi, even though she tried to move away, couldn't avoid the feeling of growing discomfort. There was something wrong, but she didn't know exactly what it was. And no matter how many times he tried to convince himself that he was just exaggerating, the feeling wouldn't go away. Santiago was changing. Their behaviors, their attitudes, their looks, everything was starting to become clearer to Mavi. But the confusion inside her left no room for a solution. She didn't know what to do, but she felt the worst was yet to come. In the days that followed, Santiago's behavior only worsened. It was as if a shadow had settled between them, something that couldn't be touched but was always there, hovering. Mavi began to notice how he was always close to her, even when it didn't seem necessary. If she was reading in the living room, he would appear. If she was in the garden, he would be there too. Sometimes Santiago would approach with a strange smile, a smile that didn't match his eyes. It was as if he was trying to hide something. But at the same time, his presence was undeniable. He was always there, watching, waiting for the right moment. Ezra, on the other hand, seemed oblivious to all of this. Ezra's work kept him busy, and the house seemed to live under the command of a gold clock, with well-defined schedules and an almost perfect flow. But Mavi knew that behind all that facade of perfection, there was an emptiness. She missed true connection, true attention, something she couldn't find in either Santiago or Ezra. They were both busy, but not with her. Santiago, on the other hand, was always available. But Mavi didn't want that. Not like that. One day, after a simple and peaceful dinner, where everything seemed normal, Santiago suddenly appeared in the kitchen, as if he expected Mavi to be alone. She was washing the dishes, unaware that he was there, watching. He approached, saying something about the wine that had arrived from France, but the way he looked at her was different, as if he was waiting for her to react. She felt a shiver down her spine, a feeling that everything was wrong, but she didn't know how to react. Mavi tried to move away, saying she was tired, that she wanted to rest, but he wouldn't move. He just stood there, standing still, staring at her. The tension became palpable. She could smell his perfume, the soft sound of his breathing. She didn't want to stay there anymore. Her heart raced and she looked for an excuse to leave. "I'm going to my room," I said, trying to remain calm. But before he could take another step, Santiago spoke. "I just wanted to talk." "It's no big deal, Mavi." It was as if he had read her thoughts, as if he knew what she was feeling, but his voice sounded colder than ever. Mavi swallowed hard and, without another word, left, almost running upstairs. But the feeling of being watched didn't go away. That feeling, which before seemed merely uncomfortable, now seemed threatening. She locked herself in her room, threw herself on the bed, and closed her eyes, trying to banish the thoughts that haunted her. But every time she opened them, the vision of Santiago standing there in the kitchen, looking at her with that smile, came back to haunt her. It was as if he was always lurking, waiting for the right moment to take the next step. As the weeks went by, Santiago began to behave even more strangely. He was always in the right place at the right time, like he knew when Mavi was alone, without Ezra around. He would show up in the middle of the night, asking if she was okay, or offering her something to drink. All this in the name of a gesture of kindness. But the truth was that Mavi knew there was something behind all of this, something she couldn't explain, but that left her anxious, with her stomach churning. Mavi tried to ignore her insecurities and fears, believing that with time everything would be resolved. She just needed to wait, waiting to turn 18, to finally have the freedom you always dreamed of. She could get out of there, start her life over again, without Santiago's gaze, without Ezra's suffocating gestures. Just a few more months. But as the days went by, Mavi felt increasing pressure. There was something about Santiago that wasn't normal. He became more possessive, more intrusive. When Mavi went for a walk, he always seemed to know where he was going. When she got together with friends from school, he was there, from afar, watching, like a shadow that never left her alone. But more than anything, he was becoming a constant presence in the moments when Mavi didn't want to be seen. He was everywhere, as if the house was his, and she was just taking up space. Then, one day, everything changed. Mavi woke up one hot summer morning, and as she went downstairs for breakfast, she noticed something strange in the air. Ezra was on a business trip, and Santiago seemed more distant than usual. He was sitting at the table, reading a newspaper, but his eyes were not on the paper. They were fixated on her. Once again, that feeling of being watched. Something was wrong, but Mavi didn't know what to do. She wanted to ask what was going on, but she knew that would only make things worse. She drank her coffee as usual, trying to stay calm, but that day something different happened. Santiago did something that left her completely speechless. He, almost surreptitiously, put something in Mavi's coffee. It wasn't much, but she noticed his movement, the slight tension in his hands as he handed her the cup. Mavi didn't suspect it right away. She drank the coffee, just as an automatic reflex. But shortly after, his eyes began to feel heavy. His vision became blurred, and a feeling of drowsiness took over his body. She tried to get up, but her legs gave out. The last thing Mavi saw before passing out was Santiago, watching her with a smile on his face, something she had never seen before, a smile of pure satisfaction. The coffee was hot, but Mavi didn't feel the heat. His eyes felt heavy, as if they had been enveloped by a blanket of mist. She didn't know what was happening, but what she felt wasn't normal. There was something in the air, a heavy feeling, as if the room itself was vibrating with a suffocating tension. Everything seemed to slowly revolve around her, and no matter how hard she tried to maintain lucidity, her senses began to fail. One by one, she tried to get up, but her legs wouldn't respond. The body seemed completely alien to her. The sound of her breathing was what bothered her the most. Each inhalation seemed to take a piece of herself away. Mavi tried to call out to Ezra, but the words came out as a whisper, muffled by the dizziness that took over her. Santiago's face came into her blurred vision, but there was something in his gaze that she couldn't process. He was there in front of you, almost waiting. Santiago watched, and his smile seemed more like a mask, another piece in a cruel game. It was a smile of someone who knew more than they should. A smile of someone who was already one step ahead, controlling the situation. He approached her almost imperceptibly, but Mavi felt the pressure of his presence, like a shadow that wouldn't leave her alone. It was as if he was planning something, and she was just a pawn in his dirty game. "Are you okay?" "Mavi?" Santiago's voice reached her like a distant echo, but at the same time clear. He bent down, looking at her carefully, almost tenderly, but there was a coldness in his eyes that disconcerted her. "I just wanted to help you. You know you can count on me, don't you?" Mavi tried to respond, but the words wouldn't come. Everything seemed in slow motion. Santiago didn't leave her side. With every minute that passed, she felt more and more that she was at his mercy, as if control of her own body was slipping through her hands. Mavi's mind began to wander. Flashbacks came to light, scenes from when he arrived at that house, still so young, full of expectations. Ezra, with his calm voice and promises of a better life, and Santiago, with that look, curious but apparently harmless. Never in a million years would she have imagined that the man who seemed so kind, so present, would be capable of something so terrible. Something was breaking inside her, and in that moment she understood the weight of her mistake. She should never have trusted him. Mavi tried to concentrate. She knew something was wrong, very wrong, but the fog in her mind was too thick. She needed help. I needed to scream, run, do something. But the body didn't respond. It was as if she had been paralyzed by an invisible force. Santiago, with the calmness of someone in control of everything, approached once again. He placed his hand gently on Mavi's shoulder, making her shiver, and in a whispering voice said, "Don't worry, Mavi. Everything will be fine. I will take care of you." Santiago's touch made her shiver, but at the same time she felt strangely helpless. His body was in despair, trying to react, but his mind was in a place where the answers seemed distant, as if he were floating somewhere outside his own body. Time seemed to stretch and contort as if she were trapped in an invisible prison with no escape, no way out. When he finally managed to get up, the feeling of vertigo increased. Santiago held her by the shoulders, preventing her from falling. She wanted to move away, but something was stopping her. She didn't know what he had done to her, but she knew she was completely vulnerable. Mavi tried to take a step back, but was stopped. He moved even closer, so close that she could feel his warm breath on her neck. That touch, that look, everything seemed unreal. Mavi wanted to scream, but nothing came out. I was trapped in an endless nightmare. "I know you don't understand, Mavi. I know you're scared," Santiago said, his voice now deep with a disconcerting firmness. "But sometimes you have to do certain things to make things happen the right way. I just wanted you to know that I will always be here, looking out for you." What was he saying? What did he really want? Mavi couldn't understand. Everything seemed distant, as if the world was disappearing around her, and only Santiago's presence remained. The feeling of being watched, of being manipulated, intensified with each second. And it was at that moment, when she could barely stand, that Santiago forced her to look at him, his eyes fixed on hers, with an intensity that Mavi would never forget. It was a possessive, cold look, as if she were just a part of his plan. He didn't see her as a person, but as something he could control. What happened next, Mavi could never describe clearly. The world seemed to spin faster, and all she felt were Santiago's touches, the whispers in her ear, and the terror that was settling inside her. Like an open wound, his mind screamed, but there was no sound. Everything was falling apart, and she was there at his mercy. Santiago, with his frightening coldness, did what he wanted. He subdued her. Mavy's body, now completely vulnerable, gave way. She didn't have the strength to react, and the pain she felt in that moment was more than physical. It was the pain of being stripped of her dignity, of being treated like a mere puppet in the hands of someone who should have protected her. When it was all over, Santiago left her alone, lying on the floor, her mind dazed and her body tired. He left Mavi there, alone with her thoughts and her pain. There was no turning back. She felt a strange sense of emptiness, as if she had been robbed of something precious, something she could never get back. She knew that in that moment everything had changed. There was no more to hide, no more pretending that nothing was wrong. The horror she felt was mixed with shame, and the feeling of betrayal invaded her completely. She knew her life would never be the same. After a few weeks, Mavi started to show symptoms of feeling sick, and her father Ezra started to think it was strange. But as he was building a relationship as a father who guides, he talked to Mavi about boyfriends, if she had gotten involved with anyone, since all the symptoms she presented indicated she was pregnant. Mavi, afraid to tell what Santiago had done to her, got around the story by saying that she should have eaten something that had upset her stomach. Time passed and Mavy's belly began to appear when Ezra took the step of buying a pregnancy test for Mavi. She took it, and it was positive, but claimed not to have been involved with anyone. Ezra, always suspicious of her husband Santiago, after seeing a box in the drawer of his bedside table hidden with a sedative, he started looking for clues until he decided to set a trap and caught his husband in the act, spying on Mavi in the shower. That day was decisive for Ezra to take action with his partner. He called the police. When the police arrived, Santiago began to have a psychotic attack, saying things about how he hated disguising himself as not liking women, that all these years he had got involved with Ezra for the money and comfort he gave him. He ended up confessing to the crime of having gotten Mavi pregnant while she was high on sedatives that he had put in her food, and that during these 5 years of marriage, he had a double life with prostitute women. After what happened, Ezra told Mavi that with her pregnancy already advanced, she would give him her son, and he would pay for an exchange in Europe for her to start her life over, with all the psychological treatment she was entitled to, and that her son would be a very good boy, loved by him. Mavi didn't want anything to do with the child, as he had been the result of violence. But if it was his father Ezra's will, he would keep baby Isaac. And so it was done. Santiago arrested, sentenced to the death penalty, Mavi restarting her life away from that nightmare with all the financial and psychological support from Ezra, and Ezra restarting his life with a baby who would have to give love and care so that he didn't grow up feeling like a rejected child. For his mother who was raped and his criminal father who was in jail, but rather that he was Ezra's choice to not pay for someone else's mistake, and that he would one day be an incredible man who was loved, respected, and deserved to live.